Hello viewers and welcome to my channel. I hope you are all doing well and you started to understand a bit more about Java. If you didn't watch my previous videos, I recommend that you will watch them before we get to this tutorial. And if you find these videos helpful, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, click the bell button and give a thumbs up at the end of the video if you consider. My name is Robert and in this tutorial I will be focusing on decision making in Java, also called choices or selections. And the first two choices that I will focus on will be if and if-else statements. So let's get started. Let's take an example so we can understand how choices work in Java. Now let's assume that a kid has in front of him three boxes, and the same like in decision making in Java, the kid needs to choose one of the boxes to open. So if he opens the left box, he will find a plain toy in there. If he chooses to open the right box, he will find a skateboard. And if he chooses to open the middle box, he will find three other smaller boxes, so it gives him the opportunity to have three more other choices. And it can continue like this on and on. Now the same way works in programming when we writing codes and we choose which box, we tell to the program which box to open. So we need to make sure that we take into consideration all the boxes and we put some conditions of which box to open and what to display. And when we run the code, we want that program to display only the choices that we written into the code. Now, Java allows us to do this with different types of statements, and a couple of them that we will discuss today will be if statement and if-else statement. We will start with the if statement in Java. So what does the if statement in Java? The if statement allows the program to choose if to execute or not the instructions that we gave into the statement based on some condition that we put before the statement. So he has the option to execute or to skip that instruction. And a very good way to understand this is by taking an example. So we have this exercise here where I created a new project. I called it project 2. Now I already imported the scanner class. If you don't remember this and you didn't watch the previous video about scanner class and how to insert input from the user, how to read it from the keyboard, I suggest that you'll watch the previous video I posted. Now I've created a variable called num. I've called the scanner class and I ask the user to enter a value for num. Now let's go and see how if statement works in our example. Now when we write the if statement, we start by writing if, and in between parentheses we give the condition. So in here, between parentheses, we will have the condition. So let's say, in our example, we take num to be greater than 12. Now, when you write the if statements, you need to put curly brackets when you're starting the statement, otherwise the code is not gonna work. And between the curly brackets, we write the instructions. So here is the condition, the num needs to be greater than 12, and between the curly brackets we put the statement. Now let's say we put system.out.println, and we want on the display if the user will insert a number greater than 12, we want on the display to be written the num is greater than 12. And let's try the program. Let's see if it works. Let's run the program. I will just see in the output is asking for a value, and we will enter, for example, 15 and hit enter. And we get the num is greater than 12, which is correct. Now let's take another example. We run the program again. Swell is asking for a value for num, and let's say 10. When we hit enter, the message inside the statement is not printed anymore because the if statement is already analyzing and it sees that the num we inserted, which is 10, is not greater than 12. Then it skips the instruction that is into the statement. So it doesn't print anymore the num is greater than 12. It doesn't print the message. Now another thing that you should keep in mind is that inside an if statement we can have multiple instructions. So in our example here we only have one instruction, which is to print a message. So if the number is greater than 12, print the message. Now let's change this code to see how can we put one more instruction. Let's say that we want, if the number is greater than 12, we want to add one more to the number, one more value. So to do this, for the variable num, we will assign it a value of num plus 1, or we can just put num plus plus. This is another way of writing this instruction. Now into the message we want to say if the number is greater than 12, add 1 to the value. And also we can put one more instruction here. We can write the instruction of a message to say the new value is, and we put the new value of the num, which is here. We put next to the message, we concatenate, as we learned in the previous video, we concatenate with the variable num. Don't forget the semicolons. And now let's run the program to see if it works. When we click run, it's asking for a value for the num. So let's say we put 14. And then it says if the number is greater than 12, add 1 to the value. And the new value is 15. So our if statement has executed all the instructions that we gave to it. Now before we can continue, there is something that you need to know. In Java, when we are writing codes, the instructions are executed in sequence. So if we look at our example here, so we have on the top, when we write in the block of code, we declare first the variable num. We declare it as a double, the type of the variable. Now we call the scanner class after that. Next there is a message, the system.out that print enter a value for num. And next is we are assigning to the num the object of the scanner class. So in this point the num gets the value which is typed by the user. Next is reading the if statement, where is the condition of num being greater than 12. So this num here is the value assigned by the user, the num from previous line. In the if statement we are changing the value of the num by adding 1 to it with num plus plus. So now the value of the num, it has been changed. And moving forward into the block of code, the value of the num will be the new value assigned here. So now when we are printing the message in the line 15, it's just a message. In the next line, in the line 16, we have here the value of the num. It's the value that we last assigned to it. So it's num plus 1. So this is the way Java was working. So it's reading in sequence all the instructions. So it doesn't go from here, from the last num, to read the first num, which was the initial value. Now, another thing that you may or may not know is that in Java, when we are using the if statements, in the condition, we are making like a comparison. So in Java is called operators. So you have here a list with the operators in Java and the meaning of it, the function of each operator apart. On the first line, you can see this is the sign for the greater than. On the second is the less than. This is the sign for the less than. On the third line, you will see there is two equals representing equal to. So when we want to say that is equal to, we don't use just one equal, we need to put two equals. When we want to say is not equal to, we are using an exclamation mark followed by an equal. Then for greater or equal to function, we are using the operator greater than followed by an equal. And the last one is less or equal to, which it has the operator of less than followed by an equal. So in our exercise here, we can replace the greater than sign. We can replace it with either two equals, if we want to say is equal to, or a not equal to, or any of the other operators we want. So here is where we can apply these operators in the condition in the if statement. Right, so I hope you understood now how the if statement works, and let's move forward to the if else statement. So this is the second statement I want to discuss about in this tutorial. So this is how the code looks like, the syntax for the if else statement. So we have on the top the if statement, the first block of code with a condition and the instruction, followed by an else statement with just an instruction. Both if and else needs to be the instructions between curly braces, because this is how we write the instructions, otherwise it's not going to work. And as we said previously, Java is working in sequence, so it's going to read line by line. So in our case, the first line here is the if statement with the block of code, and what Java will do will read the code, will read the block of code, and if it's true what is in there, it will execute the instruction and skip the else statement. Now, in the case where if statement is not true, it's gonna move forward to the else statement and it's gonna execute the instruction that we put in the else statement. And a good way to understand how if-else statement works is by doing an example. So let's go back to our exercise here, where we have already the if statement with the condition of the num being greater than 12. And let's try to use the if-else statement in this case. So what we're going to do, we're going to write the else statement now. And between the curly brackets, so in the block of code, the instruction we're going to give, if the num is greater than 12, is going to execute the first block of code. Now, in the other case where the num is not greater than 12, so the if statement, it doesn't execute, let's put the else statement to do that. So we're going to write a message. So let's say system.out.println, and the message to be the num is less than 12. So this is what we want to get displayed when we run the program. And let's run the program to see what happens. So it's asking to enter a value for the num. So because I want the else statement to be run, I need to put a num less than 12, because if it's greater than 12, it's going to execute the first block of code, which is not what I want now. So I'm going to enter the value of 10 and hit the enter, and else statement now displayed the message the num is less than 12. So as you can see, the if statement, it's skipped, so it doesn't run because the num is less than 12. but the else statement is displaying our message, so it's executing the instruction. Now in our exercise we only put one condition for the statement. Now what if we want to put two conditions? So in the case that we need to have two conditions there, how we can do that? There is logical operators in Java, and as you can see in here, there is the symbols and the function of each one of them. So if you want to say an AND, we're gonna put the first line, these two signs. If we want to say an OR, we're gonna put these two vertical lines. And for NOT function, we're gonna put the operator which is exclamation mark. So let's take these logical operators and apply them to our example here. So for the num variable, which we ask for the user to type in, we want it to be greater than 12 and to the num to be less than 20. So here we have two conditions where the num must be between 12 and 20. And if this is the case, let's just adjust a bit the bit of code here. So we're gonna say if the num is, we're gonna change it to between 12 and 20, add 1 to the value, and then the new value to be displayed on the screen. Else, we're gonna change this code here as well, the message. The num is, let's say, the num is not between 12 and 20. So let's try to run our code to see what happens. We are asked to enter a value for the num. So let's test first the if statement. So we're gonna insert a number between 12 and 20. We put a 15. We hit enter and we get the display. If the number is between 12 and 20, add 1 to the value and the new value is 16. So the first if statement run, but it skips the else statement. Now let's try again, run the code and enter a value which is not between 12 and 20. So let's say 21. We enter and then we get the message from the else statement. So the if statement is skipped and the else statement is displayed on the screen. The num is not between 12 and 20. The same rule applies when we want in here, for example, on the if condition, let's change with OR logical operator. So we say the num is greater than 12 or less than 20. So in this case, when we run the code, the num must be less than 20 or greater than 12. Now if we insert, for example, 3, then the first block of code, the if statement, runs because one of these two conditions is true. So the num is less than 20 because we inserted 3. Now let's run it again and let's see what happens. If we enter, for instance, 30, then the same, the first if statement, it runs because one of these conditions again is true, which is num is greater than 12. So the num we enter is 30, the value is greater than 12. Yes, it executes the if statement but skips the else statement. And we do a not logical operation example. So we just change a bit the condition here where the num is greater than 12 and or is less than 20. So let's say if we want to say that the num is not equal to 12. So the condition is not here. So if we run the code now, it's gonna be asking for a num value. So if the num is not equal to 12, so let's say we put 12 first, what happens? Then it skips the if statement because the num is equal to 12. So we put the not equal condition here, but because we put the 12, it skips the if statement, goes to the else statement and prints the message. If we run it again and we enter a value of 100, then it's gonna run the first bit of code, the if statement, the first block of code. Now, as we said on the beginning, when we are talking about decision making in Java, the same like our example here with the kid, when he's picking up one of the boxes, that box might contain other 3 boxes and so on. So in this case, it means that in Java, when we're using if-else statements, we can make multiple choices. So we can put an if-else statement inside of another if-else statement. This is called nested statements, where the program analyzes more than just one block of code. So for example, it reads the first statement, if it's true, if it's not, it goes to the second and the third and so on. And as usual, the best way to understand this is by an example. And we're gonna go back to our exercise here, where we have the num, and let's change a bit the condition in the if. Let's put it back to the if num is greater than 12 and num is less than 20. So until here we know already how it works, but let's change now the else statement to see how the nested statements works. So in the else statement, we're gonna put another if statement with another condition. So in this case, let's say if the num is equal to 30 and open curly bracket, because we starting a new block of code. Don't forget to open a new curly bracket when you write an if statement. So in this case, what we wanted to do, let's display a message. So let's say the message to be the num is 30, right? And in this if statement as well, we're gonna put an else statement. So in the case that the num is not equal to 30, what do we want to be displayed? As well, open a curly bracket, and in this case we're gonna put another message. Let's say the num is not 30. So let's run the code to see what happens now. So when we run the code, as we said, it's going to read line by line. So the first line is to enter a value. Now the value, if we put between 12 and 20, is going to run the first block of code, which is not what we really want to do for this example. So let's put a number which is not in this range. Let's choose, let's say 25. And what we're going to get, the result will be the num is not 30, because it goes on the first statement, is not between 12 and 20, our number, so it skips. Then is executing the else statement, where if the number is 30, which is not true, so it skips and goes to the else statement, the second else statement, where it says the number is 30, because the first if statement and the second if statement, they are not true. So the last true statement is the else statement. Now if we run it again, and let's say we enter the value for num 30 and we hit enter, the first if statement skips, the else statement starts with the if number is 30, which is true, is going to display our message, the num is 30, and it skips the last else statement. And we can continue on and on inside the else, the second else statement, to put more if-else statements and keep going and keep going. Alright, now that we went through if and if-else statements, let's make this tutorial a bit more challenging. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put here a quiz for an if-else statement, where you need to write a program that asks the user to enter values for 3 numbers and make use of the if-else statement to display the following. Is either the greatest number of those 3 if the numbers have different values, or display a message which says the numbers are equal in the case of the numbers have the same value. And to help you out a little with the beginning, I'm gonna give you like a hint, and in the next couple of seconds you will show up video how to start. But I will suggest that you pause the video now and try to do it on your own, from your own knowledge. If you encounter any issues, you just go back to the video and review the tutorial and see what is going wrong. But if you do not want to wait, you can just play this video and I will show you how I started the code and how the output it should look like once you run the code. So we have here already the code written, and I've changed, as you can see, the variables. I've added 3 numbers, declared 3 variables. On the type of the variables I've put a double. You can change it into integer if you want whole numbers. I've called the scanner class, ask the user to enter the value for the first number, for number 1, for also ask the user to enter the value for second number, num2, and ask the user to enter a value for the third number, num3. So remember, in Java, at the block of codes, each line is in a sequence, so it's going to read line by line, it's not going to skip. Now, here is the starting of your code with an if statement, and I'm not gonna explain to you exactly the whole code because I want to let you do it and to see the output, to see if it works, so you can practice more. I'm just gonna run the code because it's already written. So when I run the code, it's asking me to enter the first number. I will give it a value. Then for the second number, I will give it a different value. And for the third number, I'll give it another value. So now when I hit enter, it's showing me the greatest number of all 3 numbers is 166.9, which is correct. And let's run the code again. And instead of writing different values for these 3 numbers, I'm gonna enter the same value for each and one of them. So I'm gonna put 10 for all 3 numbers to have the same value, and when I hit enter, you should get into the output the message, the numbers are equal. So this is how your code should be running. Now, like I said, I'm not gonna show you the whole code, I let you do it on your own. And in this way, you can understand how if and if-else statements works. And if you have a good output, post it in the comments in the video below if you want. And if you encounter any errors, just review your block of code and try to make it work. And in my next video, I will display my whole block of code and I will show you how I've written the program itself. And in this way, you can compare it with your own code. We have reached now the end of our 3rd tutorial, and I hope this tutorial has been helpful for you and you enjoy it. And I'm hoping that you got a hold of the if and if-else statements and you understood them. And do practice the quiz and review the video in case you don't understand something. Post your comments below if you have any questions. Click the subscribe button and the bell icon if you want to receive more notifications about Java programming tutorials. And if you consider, you could give a thumbs up as well. And until the next time, I wish you all the best and stay safe.